what creates a positive relationship is being able to hold space for that other person, challenge them, also listen to their challenges. And if anything comes up for you, sharing maybe a boundary or something that you have and being just open with each other as you do your own individual lives.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam, and on this podcast, I talk to Gen Zers from different fields about their story and what makes them who they are and how they became the person they are today. One of the cool things about our generation is that we want to be a generation that wants to inspire people. And while it's so great to be around people who are part of my generation and seeing all the great things that they're doing, it's also important to talk about the journey and how we became the person we are today. All the obstacles we faced, all the challenges we faced, the things that have maybe we didn't like at the time, but has helped us become a better person, and just knowing more about them as a human being as opposed to what you normally see on social media or all the organizations they tie to or they're aligned with, or associated with. So I hope that you as a listener continue to be inspired and know that regardless of a person's background, you can do incredible things, and also being okay with talking about yourself in an honest and vulnerable way. Now, this week is a very interesting week and a special week because for a long time I've interviewed just one person, but this week I'm going to be talking to two people. My guests this week are Joseph Blanco and Monica Blanco. Joseph Blanco is the director of operations for FilExcellence, which is an organization that serves Filipino communities through mentorship and financial resources. And Monica is a fitness coach whose goal is to help you get more by doing less. And one of the things, it's interesting because I came across Monica's content and just seeing that not only does she provide fitness content, but also things that you can apply to in your personal life that can help you become a better human being. And so when I got to meet Monica, she brought her brother along, and I know they have a podcast they're going to be releasing soon. So I thought it'd be really cool to talk about that as well. So Monica and Joseph, thank you so much for being a part of the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast or joining the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. It's really cool to be able to talk to not just one, but two interesting people.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for that intro.
It's weird because usually I'm used to interviewing one person. So I'm thinking like, how do I bring two people in? And I think like, it's weird because like the more people you bring in, the more interesting the conversation is, in the sense that you understand more perspectives. But this is definitely a learning experience because I've never done this. So it's like I was coming in like a little nervous, but also excited to know more about your guys' story. So it's really cool to learn, be able to meet you guys. And I want to start by talking about the relationship you guys have with each other. So I want to start with, I'll go with Monica. I want to start with Monica first because you're the eldest. I have a younger brother, so I guess we can relate to the fact that we're like the eldest between the two. So I feel like even though, regardless if you're the oldest or the youngest, you can always learn something from other relatives or your other siblings. So for example, like my little brother, I'm like 7 years older than him, but I feel like I've learned more from him than he's learned from me. Like he's someone who's very thick skinned, where I'm probably more thin skinned. So I want to start with you, Monica. Like, what are some of the things you like about your brother that you wish you had, whether that's like some sort of characteristic or personality? And then Joseph, once she's done talking, what are some things that Monica has that you wish, like in terms of personality or traits, that you wish you have or you're trying to work on?
What a difficult question. And also at the same time, like not as difficult as it would have been if we hadn't been able to kind of talk about these things before. I think one of the things that I actually learned from him is that I tend to be very, very detail. Are you good?
I dropped my iPad. I'm sorry, but keep going.
I tend to be very just analytical, detail oriented. I think maybe, I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but being the panganay or like the eldest sibling, I think I've always really tried to assess any situation I find myself in and like be very, very, very observant. Whereas my brother, he is very big picture, kind of like zoom out, like what are the actual productive steps to take forward, I guess. And honestly, we actually tried to take our first or tape our first intro episode to our podcast yesterday. And I think it's really cool to be here and kind of just talk about this dynamic at the same time. Because I think honestly, this is kind of helping us ground into that project and like challenge the way that we work together. But I think one of the main things is the way that he thinks and how brave he is with the actions that he takes. Because I am sensitive too. That's also something I can relate to. I've definitely had a lot of challenges kind of growing up that Joseph has kind of seen as well. But I really appreciate kind of those things about him.
Ah, thank you. But yeah, I mean, in that same vein, I think we speak both seeing each other the idea of bravery and how I think that manifests for what I appreciate or something that I admire about her is that sociability level. As you mentioned, you're able to interact with her content or you're able to focus on that message because she's willing to put herself out there on her platforms, on in her content, anything that is able to sort of express herself authentically, which is something that has sort of been a bigger challenge as we've been developing this podcast and as I've been trying to expand myself outside of work or outside of just my personal life, trying to focus on what we hope to accomplish. And I think that's wouldn't be possible without the work that she puts in and then by being herself. And basically being able to have that commitment to improvement with whatever spaces she focuses on, like social progress, mental health, physical health, things like that, have just been made it easier for myself and felt very rewarding to see that I know it's been affecting and helpful for other people too. So,
For sure. I love both the answers, and it's really cool to see how much you admire one another. Monica, I will say this, like, there's nothing worse than I feel like there's a lot of pressure in making mistakes. And like sometimes like I feel like again, and I'm not trying to create like a narrative or I'm not like trying to like hype my brother up in some way. Like when I say like my brother's very like thick skinned and all that, like I'm being honest. Like he's someone who I'm like, it's like you can be jealous of because he probably is not making those same mistakes that I may have made. And so you kind of talked about how like he's kind of brave in his decisions, the same, or like you talked about how Joseph is very brave in the decisions he makes. My brother's similar to that, where I'm like, I don't know, should I do it? Should I not? And then I usually chicken out. So, but on the same side, I don't know what my brother would say about me. I'll just say that like as the older brother, I'll say all the nice things. But I'm sure that like if my brother was in like Joseph's situation, he would probably say some nice things. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious to know what he'll say. So,
Only
um,
one way to find out.
yeah,
Got to
you
bring him
gotta,
on.
you know what? It's funny. We've been talking about it, but I'm like, what are we gonna talk about? And he's like, when I'm maybe chess, and I'm like, maybe.
That's a great topic.
yeah, is that something you bonded over a lot, like playing? Were you very competitive?
I was like average once in a while, but my brother now could probably destroy me in like 5 or 6 moves, which is scary. And he plays it a lot, which is understandable. When you do things a lot, you tend to be better at it. So yeah, but when I have played him, it's like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this in the first place? Um, this is not good. But I one of the things that's really important to you is, and I really want to talk more about this because I thought it was really cool, is like, you guys' relationship with your identity. Obviously, you guys value each other highly, but also your Filipino background is really important. What I want to talk about now is um, mental health, physical health, and just health in general. I know Joseph, when I first met you, um, maybe, and I know it's been a while ago, and you could probably correct me, but like you're more of an electrical and computer engineering major. I don't know how much of this you were involved in. So for you, I know Monica, you've been asked this a lot, so I'll probably let you take a break for the time being. But Joseph, when you see your sister and all the things she does with, fitness and health, and whether it be physical or mental health, what has the relationship with health been like for you? I mean, were you someone that kind of, you probably didn't experience it as much, you kind of just like went along, or was it something that you kind of struggled with? Like, what was your relationship with health like?
Yeah, so I would say that it was pretty polarizing. I think that's maybe the situation for a lot of people, to where just not very conscious about like the effects that would have, or at least growing up, that that wasn't really focused on terms of like whatever uh nutrition or behaviors would be good towards something that would be conducive for me. Um, and that sort of manifested itself in college, as you sort of mentioned. I studied electrical computer engineering, not the most um, balanced on terms of work and health. And that sort of started to weigh on me a lot, both physically, mentally. A lot of late nights, a lot of stress eating, things that sort of led me to being able to there that made it harder, honest, in all honesty. And then it just sort of felt very difficult to try and um keep going forward, I guess, is a way to say it. But in a weird way, I don't want to say fortunately the pandemic hit, but the pandemic hit, and that made me, well, it made everybody hopefully a lot more conscious about the effect that mental and physical health have on yourself, and then being able to make the right decisions and take care of it. And I do owe Monica a lot of personal gratitude for being able to create that vocabulary, or create that thought process that were able to help me like make smarter and more conscious decisions for myself. And then, of course, things change. Of It's not always going to be perfect, but always trying to be better, or always trying to work towards what feels right for yourself or for what you aspire to be. I think I owe a lot to her, and then I can at least be comfortable with myself now, and try and use that in my career, or working on helping the Filipino community.
Damn,
Monica,
you about to make me cry.
Monica, there's
Ah.
one question I want to add, but I want to ask you, Joseph. So I'm a computer science major, and so um, I know Monica can't really relate to this, but because she's not a computer science major, but in the Asian community, if you're a guy, it's like either a computer science is like
Mhm.
engineering, or like computer science.
Mhm.
Um, I think I call it like the Fantastic Four, so like science, technology, engineering, math. Like these four things are like, these are the things you have to do. My parents were very flexible, but it was one of those where I found my interest in a specific area of computer science. But for you, like, you know, do you ever feel like you almost live in fear because of the expectations? Now, again, I don't know what it was like for you growing up, because I met you guys still relatively a few weeks ago. But when you kind of look at like the common stereotypes, and I don't want to throw that term out unless you're really interested in computer engineering, but like when you kind of like look at what people expect when they see someone who looks like you or looks like me, do you feel like there's a level of fear that you need to make sure you become the best version of you? And sometimes that involves like, that might mean like sacrificing your health because you want to continue to like, I don't know, show people that this is who you are in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it totally does. And I guess to your first point, for definitely, there's always like the holy trinity of, doctor, lawyer, engineer, that I think is pretty common. And our parents were always, they always said that they were very open and understanding about what we wanted to do. And I do believe them, but it is interesting that my top choices were lawyer and engineer, and my sister's was doctor and engineer. So I don't know how much credit we're going to give it to them, but I definitely understand what you mean by sort of fitting into stereotypes or fitting into an expectation. I definitely had that a lot as a kid, especially like throughout most of like elementary and middle school. That where I mean, I was relatively gifted at science and math and things like that, and then once people start building up that expectation, and then it only gets reinforced by your ethnic identity or what you look like, it starts adding on pressure, and then it sort of gives you that idea of trying to fit into, I guess, that minority standard, which is a very common thing that we are trying to sort of both individually and socially evolve past. But that shouldn't be a deterrent for things you are passionate about. I did find my interest in computer engineering just because I thought that would not only sort of, it would admittedly satisfy, whatever communal or parental expectations there would be for a career, but I can talk about this later, but I really like what is possible, or I like the idea of being able to make innovative things that can help people. And don't want to try and be limiting myself based off of what I look like or what my last name is.
For sure. And it's funny because so kind of like your parents, my parents were very open. They said as long as whatever you find, whatever makes you happy, go for it.
Yeah.
So I got into computer science because I was really interested in building websites. Now the podcast was different because no one knows who I am. And so it's like I almost feel like I'm living in fear because while my parents might be okay, not everyone my parents are from Bangladesh. So like as someone who's Bengali American, like they might be okay, but what about the rest of the Bengali community that I grew up with? Are they going to be okay? Even though you're like, yeah, I'm still going to do computer science, like I'm still your quote unquote golden child. The fact that I'm kind of pursuing this route in some sense, it's like don't try to be like that kid because that podcast is going to fail, or your idea of storytelling doesn't resonate with me. And it's like your worth, but sometimes like your worth can only shield you from so much. And it's like how do you try to become stronger than I guess the outside noise? So I think we can definitely dive into that a little bit more. Monica, I know we talked about the first question, which was like, what are some things you love about your brother that you wish you had? As someone who has a lot of interest in health, physically and mentally, what are some of the conversations you have with your brother? How do you try to like, I guess, have those conversations? Because sometimes I feel like as the oldest sibling, talking to your younger siblings can be a challenge because it's like, I mean, and I guess it also depends on like age level because I don't know the age difference, but there's still a challenge because one, it's like, oh my gosh, my older sibling's trying to help me. This is embarrassing. And I don't know, sometimes like there's those moments where because like, I don't know, just because of the fact that it's like, I don't know, I guess it's like a sign of embarrassment. Like if I try to help my brother out in front of his friends, I'm worried that he might think like I'm embarrassing him in some sense instead of me just trying to help him. So like for you, like how are you trying to help your brother try to create like a better relationship when it comes to health? I guess let's put it that way.
Oh, let me think here. I think I carried a lot of just guilt and shame growing up, especially with how I treated my brother when we were very young. Our age difference is 4 years. So you can imagine, I'm not sure what the age gap is between you and your brother, but we kind of were living our lives at such different stages. So it was really, really difficult for us to connect from, I don't know, say middle school to high school, I guess. And I think what I maybe naturally did, or when I kind of recognized, oh my gosh, like in one sense, Joseph is all I have. Like my brother's all I have that can really, really understand and relate as much as possible to my own experience, my lived experience growing up. How can it's all, I don't know, like you want to be connected to your family in that way. At least I do. And in recognizing that, I think I realized I need to make this relationship a priority if I want it to carry on and whatever. And I think I tried my best to spend more intentional time with him and really understand, okay, what is he about? Like we can live in the same home and not know jack about each other or our interests or what really lights us up. And so I think even if it were in a car ride somewhere, just kind of leaving open space for him. It's really funny. Um, the times I remember my brother opening up to me weren't necessarily like, hey, let's go out for a beer and talk. They've typically just been times where like you try to kind of create a safe-ish space or something, like driving, and he'll just blurt out something super random that's pretty significant. And that's fine. Whatever way you kind of are vulnerable and whatever's comfortable to open up to, like whatever method that is for you, that's great as long as you're able to express it. But it's so funny. I'll be driving and it'll be kind of quiet, maybe music playing, and Joseph is just like, so I think I'm gonna break up with da da da. I don't think it was anything specific like that, but you know what I'm saying. And when it came to matters of health, like if you care about someone, you'll check in on them, right? And when it was deep into COVID, he was on this whack ass schedule because he was taking classes through his school in China. His schedule is all flip flopped. I never saw him really like leave his room. I was just kind of, how are you feeling? Like asking someone how they're feeling, honestly, is already a way to open the door to have conversations about any other aspect about health, I would say. Like kind of understanding them and meeting them where they're at. Because health is such a big, broad kind of term. And there's so many facets of health too, that I think giving people the space to share how they're feeling can really lead you to, okay, what aspect of health maybe needs a little bit of help, or just some looking after.
Yeah, and to kind of address, so like me and my brother, we're 7 years apart. So like I'm 21, he's 14. I forgot math for 2 seconds. But what I will say, and it's maybe this sounds weird when I think about it, but sometimes I feel like it's true. Sometimes the easiest questions are usually the most powerful or the most insightful questions. So even as simple as how are you feeling, it, like you said, it opens up the door for them to really express themselves. And it's funny because I interviewed someone who has her own podcast, and her first question to every guest, and she records it, is how are you really feeling? And she's giving that space to really let people know, like, you are okay to talk about how you're feeling. It doesn't have to be like, like sometimes we lie to people. Like we'll go like, hey, how are you? And we're like, we're doing good, because we just don't want to talk to the people. But being able to give that space, it really is like being able to give that space to just show people that you are willing to accept that you may not be 100%. Like I don't want to hear you just say, oh, I'm doing fine. Like you're like, I'm okay with you telling me that maybe you're not 100%, and let's try to talk about it. Maybe I won't solve all your problems, but sometimes just talking about it is better than hiding it, if that makes sense. Joseph, as the younger sibling, how do you like, do you ever worry about embarrassment in any way? Because whether you are the recipient or you're whether Monica's telling you things or when you're telling Monica things, like, have you ever worried about being embarrassed or worried about what she might say, even though she's your sibling, and still 4 years is still relatively like a kind of like a medium-sized gap. Like sometimes telling your older siblings can be like a daunting thing because it's like they're older, if that makes sense. So have you ever dealt with like embarrassment? You don't have to say anything explicit or specific, but have there been moments where you're like, I don't want to tell Monica? Or do you feel like you've developed that relationship where it's like, I'm okay telling Monica whatever and she won't judge me?
Oh, I love this question.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think so. For at least how I see embarrassment would maybe just see it would have to be like a very explicit sort of like power imbalance, if that makes sense. So like I would be embarrassed to tell my parents something if I feel like, oh, I messed up, but I have always sort of been like it's been us, and of course she was the Pananay or the older sister, and it was that was ours sort of like an implicit understanding. But for a quick explanation about Filipino culture, so there's a couple layers. For your cousins and your older siblings, they are ates and cuyas, and then so that's sort of like one level. And then there's the next level, which is like your uncles and your aunts, so your titos and your titas, and then you get to grandparents and so forth. Because we sort of were on that, for me in my head, if that makes sense to visualize, there is just that sort of same understanding that we were the same generation or we were siblings, and I wouldn't necessarily feel embarrassed to tell her, but it was always sort of just an apprehension not to say anything at all, which is that might be a separate issue to bring up. But embarrassment wise, I think even now, I wouldn't say so, especially as we've gotten closer and as we're willing to share. I can picture some like any stronger emotional things, or even just how something made us feel, like uh if we did something that would upset us or we even appreciated, we are a lot more intentional now about expressing how that actually felt. And then I think we're both individually both able to like handle that and listen to the other person and accept that and then try and improve or appreciate it for what um they did.
So, Monica, I know like as the older sibling, you like kind of how Joseph talked about how like he's open to telling you things without embarrassment. Have you, and again, you don't have to be specific. You can keep that to yourself, but like have you been able to tell him things? Because I think it's like for a younger sibling to talk to an older sibling, it's much easier than an older sibling telling a younger sibling things, just because maybe you've experienced more in life. Like, for example, like I can't talk to my little brother about college because he's not in college. If that makes sense, I know that's like a bad example. So, like for you, are you like ever, or have there been times where you're hesitant to tell Joseph things that you're going through? And I think this is like an interesting question because you're a mental, like you're involved in mental health advocacy. Like, are you ever kind of like worried or embarrassed or like nervous to talk to Joseph about things just because you're the older sibling, or do you feel like you can still reciprocate what Joseph does to you?
Oh man, I can. Well, I'm trying to be better at this too, of assessing people's kind of capacity to even listen. If I do have something emotional to share or something that might be considered pretty heavy, because I don't know, sometimes it can be super hard to compartmentalize other people's, you know, things that they share, if we're not feeling grounded emotionally ourselves. But I'm trying to be better at that, just being like, do you have room? Like, do you have space for me to just dump? And like, also just trying to be careful about how I like kind of share these things. But TLDR, no. I called my brother probably more often than my friends sometimes, which is so wild to me because I mean, years ago it was the opposite. But I think going back to what I kind of initially said, since we do share a lot of lived experiences, as far as our upbringing goes, I think I do go to him and defer to Joseph quite often with personal stuff, even professional stuff, or whatever is kind of on my mind. I mean, there's stuff too about being a woman that he can't relate to necessarily, but it's still nice to have, his kind of perspective on certain things. And I'm sure there are things that I do not share with him or with anyone in general that I personally need to sort out myself. But for the most part, I guess there really is no filter. And I think maybe something we can mention too is we both were like, why don't we do therapy? Why don't we do sibling therapy? Um, just because communication is everything. And so I think the reason we can now say that we can depend and trust each other is also kind of affirmed or has been reaffirmed by going to therapy and talking about talking.
For sure. It's like talking is, like I said, talking about things is better than just hiding it. And there's one more question I wanted to ask when it comes to like relationships, like from the sibling perspective. But before I ask that, I do want to, because you are passionate about mental health, you guys have talked about your admiration for one another and the things that you guys love about each other. But one thing that, and I've asked a lot of mental health advocates about this because I think for a lot of people, and I've said it so many times, but I think it's true, just because you're a mental health advocate or you have interest in this field, it doesn't mean that you're like 100% like you're like you're happy 100% of the time. Like you will still have your moments where like you have your bad days. But I don't want to talk about relationships with other I don't want to talk about relationships with other people. I want to focus on relationships with yourself. And so sometimes we don't know, like we try to be the best friend to other people, but we don't usually become the best friend to ourselves. Just because like, and I don't know, Monica or Joseph, like how you guys do this, but like I'm a people pleaser. So I'll say yes to like everyone, but I won't say yes to myself. And so I know sometimes people think looking after yourself is selfish instead of looking at it as self-care and all that sense. So for both of you guys, I know Joseph, I don't know how much you're involved in mental health, but for you guys, tell me about how you would describe the relationship with yourself, because you can be the best version to everyone else. And Monica and Joseph, you guys have been kind and generous to me when needed. But how would you guys look at your relationship with yourself? And this is more like when no one's watching. It's just like you being able to spend time with yourself. And I'll let Monica go first.
Oh my gosh. This has been really this year the kind of underlying theme of understanding myself as an individual and also myself within a collective or within a community or organization or my friends or whatever. And really being able to ground myself in who I define myself to be, I guess. And honestly, I think what you said earlier about people being mental health advocates, it's not realistic to think that every day is going to be perfect and happy and wonderful and rainbows. I think part of being an advocate is still is being an advocate for yourself too. And to be honest, I have not been the best friend that I, desire to be or want to embody. But I think that's also part of the whole journey is really learning to love every part of yourself and like everywhere you go, like there you are sort of thing. So regardless of what relationship you're entering into, community you're a part of, can you say that you can bring all of you, like your needs, wants, desires, boundaries, and like truly live out the fullest expression of who you are? Those are kind of the questions I've been asking myself lately. And I have also come to realize I identify so closely with the people around me, with my family, with who I surround myself with. And it's interesting you also bring up being a people pleaser, because I think that's a very common experience among children of immigrants to want to appease people around them or maybe avoid this sort of discomfort and feeling of not truly belonging in certain spaces, especially if you're the one that looks different or the one that isn't from here or whatever. And I don't know, I've really been trying to investigate that and understand that, because I'm someone that I can be so aware of what I'm doing and reason my through things. Um, yeah, like rationalize my emotions and stuff too. But I think at the end of the day, if I'm not living my values or being true to my values, that's kind of like the only power that we have. Um, I don't know. I feel like you also kind of know when you're overstepping and when you're not cultivating a healthy relationship with yourself because you adopt all of these people's values that you're not even really sure are your own. So I'm like, when someone has the answer to how to kind of sort that out, I'll keep everyone updated, but I'm still working on that myself too.
Yeah, but in that same vein, it's also like within, I guess how I also see it was that not only there's the idea of like values, and then how I personally have been like being able to grow for myself or with myself is the idea of like purpose. And it becomes really easy for me to not treat myself properly if I can become sort of listless in how I want to hold myself or how I want to like make the most out of the day. Of course, taking care of yourself is important, but then like without having that defined idea about what matters, and then that can come from your community or your identity, things like that. And for me, it is rooted, instead of being a people pleaser, how I like to picture it is that when I'm always maybe devaluing myself, it's always for the idea of some like greater good, that there's a responsibility that I need to have towards others or to my community, to where I can be self-sacrificial, or I can delay my own gratification for the what seems more important. But that's there is a level of responsibility that comes, but that is not conducive to actually properly taking care of yourself. And I think remedying that and finding that balance between your purpose and your values, between yourself and with others, is how I've been able to hopefully connect better internally.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how to really to be the best friend to myself. Like that, I feel like that's going to be a constant journey. It's not something that you will reach at a certain point, just because as you get older, there'll be more challenges, there'll be more expectations, there'll be more people you meet. And so as you kind of experience those things, you got to really start to look back and go, how am I going to continue to be the best version of myself? Because if I'm not going to be able to do that, I can't be the best version to those around me, or regardless of how close I am with that person. Um, and I literally forgot what I was going to ask. I'm sure it'll come up at some point, but and that's me. Like every time I'm like, I have an idea, and then 5 seconds later, I forget it. But I'm sure it'll come back. Before we talk about FilExcellence and Filipino identity, I want to ask you guys one question when it comes to you guys' areas of expertise. So, for example, as someone like Joseph, electrical computer engineering, Monica, mental health, fitness content, I think aside from the fact that whatever you pursue, there's obviously those skills there's obviously like those technical skills for what you're pursuing. So computer engineering, there's a lot of coding. For mental health and fitness, you obviously know like, okay, like how do you take care of your body? But what are some, I guess, life skills that you feel like you've taken away from those experiences? So for example, and I know this is like a obvious thing for podcasting, but for me, like sometimes I struggle talking to people because I'm like, whether I'm meeting someone new or I've met someone more than once, it's like, what are they going to think? Are they going to think negatively? So I use podcasting as a way for me to overcome that fear of talking to people, like almost like social anxiety in some sense. And it's worked. Sometimes I overthink on the podcast because I love having like interesting conversations. So like I use podcasting as a way for me to like learn how to communicate with people. Joseph, I'll start with you because I think I let Monica go first. So what has electrical computer engineering, like what are some life skills you feel like you've taken away that if you didn't do this, you would not have able to obtain those skills in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. So I think fundamentally, from when I decided to pursue engineering as a major, I think even in college in general, when I decided to go, something that stuck out to me was outside of those, technical hard skills, what tools could I gain from these 4 years that I could then apply to what is important to me in the future or what I want to be as an adult? Of course, who I was at 17, 18, choosing what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go, um, is unrealistic, but at least you're setting sort of that framework for how you can grow. I think the main thing with engineering was fundamentally it is problem solving. It is having a set of tools or processes that you can apply to create a solution and hopefully help other people out. So that involved, of course, you can use um, science and math and resources to your ability, but at least approaching a problem and then being able to understand it, break it down into its parts, and then create a method at which you can experiment and understand it felt very rewarding and satisfying to create things. And of course, organizational skills. It's still questionable, but I think learning how to balance a lot of different and unique workloads has been more applicable as I've sort of started branching out outside of just my career or my engineering job, as we're going to get into later, doing this podcast or doing FilExcellence has been able to help me like balance myself and again take care of myself with as things become more important, as things need to get done. I try and make sure to consciously think, how can I best um, do what I need to do while also taking care of myself.
For sure. And so you talked about problem solving skills, and I think those are really important. I was actually surprised you didn't say patience, because as a computer science major, the amount of times I feel like throwing my computer and breaking it, the amount of times I feel like doing it, it's just too much, because it's like, you're like, why
Right.
is this not working? And even today, I needed help with some issue I had in my, like, for coding. And I asked someone, I was like, why is this not working? And he's like, well, because you forgot you forgot to declare a variable. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Monica, but like, just so like you forgot to declare a variable, and I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, that's why my computer is crashing. So I was gonna say patience, just because like sometimes you really do need to like be like, you really have to wait, and you can't just rush it or like be too mad. You have to understand that it's like a process in some sense. um Monica, I'm not a fitness buff by any stretch of the imagination, but what are some things you feel like you've taken away? What are some life skills you feel like you've taken away from being involved in fitness that if you weren't in this, you probably would not have attained those skills?
Patience. like I mean, it's true. As I think really, and it's not just patience with other people, it really is patience with yourself and meeting yourself where you are in order to take sustainable steps towards whatever goal you sort of have, right? Which is why I think a lot of trainers will say so much application and things that you learn in the gym translate to everything else outside of it too. The ability to kind of challenge yourself and overcome self-limiting beliefs, to put yourself out there and have courage to even walk into a gym and like be around all of these sweaty bodies picking up heavy things and then putting them back down. Like what what a concept, but also being able to see the efforts that you've put in over time and like realize those tangible results, I guess, is super, I mean, gratifying. So you learn a lot about delayed gratification, and at the same time how your body is so unique and different to you, and it you just can't compare yourself to anyone else because you have no idea that person's biology, you have no idea that person's schedule, workload, stressors, resources available to them too. So kind of giving yourself a lot of grace, compassion to also kind of just ride whatever wave that you're on. And I think also the biggest thing that's foundational to anything, not just fitness, is really self-acceptance. Like really learning to accept yourself where you are in that moment and in every moment that follows. Because sometimes, and it's helpful sometimes, but the reason people start to get into fitness is because they don't have self-acceptance. I guess if that kind of makes sense. So in order to keep going and really like build that muscle, it's also those reps too of like building that muscle of self-acceptance and not shaming yourself for missing a day or eating a certain way. I mean, there's so much you can learn about yourself in the gym, like adaptability and flexibility too, because no one's schedule is ever perfect unless you are someone with a shit ton of money and can just like automate so much of your life and like have people cook for you and have people do this and that for you. It's just not realistic. So I think there's just so much there, and like learning the body of how everything is inextricably linked, like your mind, body, soul, whatever. There's just so much more, I guess, that you can learn.
Yeah, and I think one thing I really took away, or one of the things I took away was comparison, because I think yeah, we do live in it, and it's not just gym, it can be about anything where it's like we got to see what this person is doing. But at the end of the day, we don't necessarily know what they're doing, what they had to do to get to where they're currently. So like I can't look at Monica and be like, "Oh wow, Monica's doing really great." You probably are, but there's still challenges that you have. And then same thing with Joseph. Like, yeah, on the outside you might be doing great, but we don't know what some things you're dealing with or going through. So that's why it's so important to have like conversations like these where you just get to know them for what they are or what people are, which is a human being as opposed to who they are. It's a weird catchphrase. I'm sure I'll polish it at some point. But it's really important to just know that everyone has a unique story. And just because they might seem great on the outside, there's still a lot of things that they probably going through that might make you that maybe you're either not going through as much, or like I don't want to say like, oh, you're going through much worse than I am, but it's like, oh wow, I didn't know they are going through these situations. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like I want to be like, I don't want to say like, oh, you're going through much worse, because I feel like that's a very dark way of saying it, but it's like, oh wow, I didn't know you were doing this, because I see all the success, but I didn't see all the challenges. So I hope
Yeah,
that
you
made
make
sense.
sense. Yeah, that
I
that
was,
makes a lot of sense. I think that's
Yeah, for
why it
sure.
can be hard to share a lot of what you're going through, because we have this scale of like, oh, what's a hard thing? Like, what are hard things that people go through? And that person's situation is relative, but like they're going through a lot harder shit than I am. So who am I to complain? But I think in that way, you're invalidating your own experience. Like everyone's experience is valid. You don't have to shy away from taking up space and sharing, what has been bothering you or what you've been struggling with, just because it's not to this level of, you know, emotional pain or something. But it is the kind of the culture that we're in is full of comparison.
for sure.
Yeah. But I
Um,
mean, that's, oh, sorry. But
no, go
yeah, that's
ahead.
kind of what I want to say is what I really appreciate about your podcast is that, um, I mean, we're still very young, admittedly, and we're still growing, but that doesn't mean that our experiences are less valid or that our issues are not as important. And highlighting that and being able to build this connection in this community has been a way to sort of raise the consciousness, I think, for people our age or for our generation. So that's cool.
I want to transition into the Filipino identity in FilExcellence. And one of the interesting questions I've been asking people, especially if they have like a different background, whether that be Middle East or Asian, whatever their background is like how much pressure are they putting on themselves to show the positive image? And I know you guys are both like there's only two of you. I mean, I know like two people don't speak for the entire Filipino community. There's obviously different experiences and everything else, but still being a part of that community, trying to be like the best version. Of course, there's things that you can't control, but like still trying to be a part of this. Like, hey, I'm someone of Filipino identity, or I have a Filipino identity. I want to show people that we can do a lot of really good things in society. So I kind of want to stay away from that question because I feel like there's probably an answer to that. What I do want to ask is, I guess, maybe who you're trying to prove. So, like, as someone who wants to empower Filipino communities, and I know, Monica, you have I know you're also a part of FilExcellence, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. So, for you guys, as someone who wants to empower Filipino communities, who do you feel like is your biggest enemy, or I guess you're trying to improve, or you guys are trying to like make a point to? Do you feel like you're trying to like do you feel like you're trying to prove Filipino communities that you have potential in something even if you're not seeing it? Do you feel like you're trying to prove a point to people who are not Filipino because they don't know your way of living, they don't know some of the challenges you go through, whether that's externally or internally? Or do you feel like it's more like I'm trying to make a point to myself? Who do you feel like you're trying to improve? And I'll let or who do you feel like you're trying to prove the most? I'll let Joseph go first.
Okay. Well, first things first, I just want to say Monica is not just a part of Phil Excellence. She is, in fact, a founding member. I have only joined relatively recently, and I think a lot of our success and our established progress is due in part to her. So I just want to give her that credit. But to sort of digest all the stuff you mentioned on terms of who we want to prove it to, fundamentally, I think we just want to do this for ourselves first and foremost. Because as you mentioned, everyone's journey is unique. Um, but being able to do it with someone like your sibling who understands it and also has the same goals and desires as you to connect with their identity has been really important, I think, for my own personal growth. So that this podcast, Opo, is a way to sort of channel that and to put more intention into how we want to go through this journey of self-discovery. But even though it's everyone is different, we know that there's a lot of shared struggle and shared experience that we can hopefully relate to our listeners for. And regardless of their life experience, that it would be for anyone who is having a hard time connecting with their identity or know someone who, for example, takes their identity for granted and had it as an assumption or had a difficulty to connect with it. So our hope would be someone like, say, an older uncle from the mainland who thinks that Film Americans are entitled or they don't appreciate their identity or whatever misconception they may have, that hopefully they can listen to our podcast and then that they can connect with someone who is part of their community. And I don't want to steal Monica's catchphrase, but something that we're talking about was it's not calling out the people that had misconceptions or are maybe disingenuous for helping Filipinos. It's calling in to connect with each other and to understand and to grow together.
Yeah, I'm glad we had that revelation, just because the dynamic of just calling people out for, I don't know, certain behaviors that maybe are not necessarily helpful to the community in this context at this time, uh but to really have a honest and vulnerable conversation of, okay, well, we know this doesn't work, so how can we move forward from here? And while we can relate on a lot of these shared traumas and problems or challenges, whatever, we can also be the ones to support each other and lift each other up through those challenges and really help build a more sustainable kind of foundation for us now and the people that will come after us too. I think because the Filipino value of bayanihan, of community spirit and really supporting each other. I was saying something the other day, like you don't have to like people to look after them. And I think when we're creating anything, it's hard to say like anything that you make isn't going to be significant because it's only much later, maybe not even in your lifetime, that you kind of see the results of those actions or that meaningless project that you did. But as far as FilExcellence goes, I think for me, when we were forming that 501c3 nonprofit, so much opened up for me as far as what it really meant to be Filipino. And I mean, a lot of things that I learned about our history and community that maybe I wasn't super excited to learn. And I guess how that also has a ripple effect to the diaspora as a whole too. But I think FilExcellence really allowed me to go against the grain in a sense. And instead of perpetuating a lot of behaviors, I'm sure that are seen across all, like most other cultures as well, actually being part of something that actively works against these things. And again, like Joseph said, calls people in to kind of talk about them is already, I don't know. I think it's very fulfilling and impactful to be a part of a larger group that's kind of working towards something bigger than themselves. And I think the podcast is also just kind of an extension of that. But it kind of all goes back to like also safety and creating those spaces for people to be themselves and to know themselves, regardless of like what that might look like or feel like to them.
For sure. And I feel like, I don't know, sometimes it's like you kind of, it's like almost like one third proving a point. I don't know, like for me, I feel like it's one third proving my point to myself, one third to my own community, and then one third to people who are not part of the community. But I feel like there should be more emphasis on the community that you're a part of, because it's, again, it goes back to the potential. And Monica, you talked about how it's something even bigger that maybe other people may not have seen. So it's, I feel like, and I said this so many times, and I'm sure you guys can easily relate to this, but it's like when it comes to like our community, we can be our greatest allies or our bestest of, or we can be our best friends, but we can also be the biggest bullies. And so I was talking about like kind of how, with Joseph, like there's this fear of like telling people about the podcast, telling people that I love storytelling. And it's like, why? How much money are you making? How much money does it normally make? And I'm like, oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. But that's the thing. Like, can we look to inspire people and realize that we have potential in this? And yeah, there are going to be people that don't like it, but can we have like a positive net impact, if that makes sense? Like positive impact over negative impact, and just realizing that we can see it. It may not make sense now, but it will make sense in the future. And that's why I think like long term is really important, just because it's not going to make sense. I think a lot of successful organizations, or when it comes to making an impact, when you first start, it probably doesn't make any sense to you, but you're at least trying. And then as you continue on, as you continue with this growth process, you see like the thing, you kind of have like an idea of like, this is what I really wanted to see. And, obviously you'll have people that don't like it, but focus on the people that want to empower you. And so it's difficult because it's coming from your own community, but at the same time, it's like, it's a good thing because it's also coming from your community. So I'm not Filipino, but like, I would be like, oh, wow, Monica, Joseph, you're doing such great things and I want to be a part of it. And I think that's a great sign, as opposed to me being like, oh, you guys are terrible. This is useless. So yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
kind of rambled on, but I do think like it is definitely a process. And I know that even though you guys have had your success, I know there's still a lot more things to, I guess, grow from or learn from, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah,
Yeah.
always, always. Because I
Mhm.
mean, I think I can echo that sort of same sentiment back to you with what you're doing with your podcast. I know you've been vulnerable in sharing some of the things that make you feel hesitant to share or maybe uncomfortable, but like what you're doing is it's hard to know how impactful this project is going to be until, much later down the journey. And so your ability to persevere and continue despite how you might be feeling around your own community or whoever else, I think that is also what makes you you. Like that's something to be very proud of and to own as you move forward, because I really admire like any creator, seriously, to put themselves out there in this way. It's so hard. It's so hard. And then having the added layer of your background and identity and everything else, like informing the way you think at times. It's really tough. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge that because that's kind of been this whole podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And before we talk about the actual, your podcast,
Mhm.
I talked a little bit about growth, or like I went on a ramble about growth, but I don't want to talk about your organization. I do want to talk about you growth as an identity, because yes, you're doing a lot of great things with FilExcellence and your intentions and what you want to do. But I also feel like even though you guys are really proud of who you are, there's always something that maybe you want to improve on. And so I'll give you an example. This is like low bar, but still something I want to do. So like as someone who's Bengali, like I grew up not speaking the language. And so one of the things I really want to do, like if you ask me like what's one aspect of the Bengali culture that I want to improve on, is learning the language so that I can talk to my parents, I can talk to my grandparents or other relatives, other friends. Now, granted, I've seen the language; it's hard, it's extremely difficult, but I definitely want to learn it. And I know it's a low bar, but still, like I feel like it's like language is a great way. It's obviously like one of the most important things you need, because you need to be able to understand other people. So my thing is a low bar, but I don't care. So for you guys, what is one aspect that you want to improve on? And I know Filipino Bengali, we have different cultures, but like what's one aspect of your Filipino identity or culture where you're like, I want to improve this because I feel like it will make me, I guess, closer to my identity or background? And I'll let Joseph go first.
Okay, yeah, thank you. But also, I just want that's not a low bar. I
Yeah,
mean,
that
it's
I wanted
very,
to. Oh my God,
yeah,
I was
that's
going to
so,
interrupt too. I was
yeah,
like, that is
that's,
not learning a
yeah,
language is effing hard, especially later in life. Like, anyway.
yeah, I'd say it's a shared, it's like maybe like a common denominator, but it's definitely not, yeah. It's, it takes a lot of effort and it's something to be proud of however much you grow. I mean, that's something that I personally feel. But I would say specifically for Filipino culture is something that has sort of risen in more prominence, at least for the past few years, either hopefully on on a larger scale, but something that has been more apparent is just sort of getting more in touch with pre-colonial Filipino history and culture. So the indigenous Filipinos, when they settled there before Spain or Magellan or anyone, trying to connect with that identity about how it was able to still persist through that. And I think that's something very commendable. And it's something that I never really was able, like, at least exposed to. I mean, I'm very proud of the Philippines and its diverse mixed culture identity, and for all of its influences to become something unique. But tapping into that um, spirituality, history, culture is something that I feel like could only lead to better understanding of myself and other Pinoys.
Yeah, and I think all of that without kind of comparing or thinking that there's a level or like, you know, I guess I'll put some context to it. I want to have a better understanding of kind of similar, like just history, but specifically our family's history too, like our family tree and more of our story of how my parents migrated here or something, to be able to really understand and speak to that would be something that I would like to be better at. And as I mentioned, not holding myself to this arbitrary standard of, oh, I don't know exactly this like auntie's story or something. But I'm also trying to learn Tagalog, or the language that is mainly spoken in the Philippines, the main language there. And it has been so hard. I can understand it fluently, but actually speaking it and not feeling super insecure that I sound like a white girl or whatever, that's just hard. But I'm trying, and I think my parents are grateful I'm making an active effort. So I'm with you on that boat.
Yeah, for sure. Like I went to Bangladesh summer of 2022, and I asked my mom like, "Can I speak Bengali or should I speak Bengali?" She's like, "No, just speak English. They're gonna make fun of like they'll make fun of you." It's like, all right, cool. Um, but yeah, and like, okay, I'm grateful that you guys didn't think it was a low bar because like I look at my friends and they're able to speak it at a much better, they're more fluently and more articulate, and they don't sound like a white person as people would say. So I'm like, I'm trying to work on it, but it is so difficult. Like I remember, and I'm like you, Monica, in the sense that I can understand like 90% of the things they say, but then explaining it or reading it is a complete no-no. So I definitely want to improve on that. Um, Before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to talk about your podcast. I know we talked so much about relationships with you guys and your identity because I thought it was really important because, I mean, that's what makes you guys human beings. So I apologize if I took way more time than needed, but I wanted to have like a genuine conversation. I want you guys to talk about your podcast. And I know by the time this episode comes out, you'll probably have a much better idea as to where you guys are, but tell me a little bit more about what, I guess, like the background of the podcast, what you hope to do. I know Joseph, you talked a little bit about it when we talked about like the empowerment side of the Philippine of empowering Filipinos. But tell me more about the podcast, and you and whoever has an answer, you guys can go ahead. And then, do you guys also have like a name in mind, or is that something you're still trying to figure out?
I guess I can start us off. So I think something that I really want to embody, I guess, moving forward in my life, is to like co-create what I wish I had when I was younger. That's kind of something I've been really trying to ground myself in. So, what things would have been helpful to me, like as a younger child, or even like now, like what do I need? Like what does it mean to be my own best friend and support system or whatever. And I think podcasting has always been something I've been super curious about. And and like I said earlier, like I admire anyone that creates, especially a podcast. But and then there's the imposter syndrome too of like, why would anyone care what I have to say? I'm nobody. But I think we have seen the power of social media, and I'm talking about more of the positive side of social media with how much easier it has been to connect to each other. And again, I think it's creating that space for people to hear other perspectives, and kind of showcasing this is what it looks like to kind of do an honest exploration of your own culture, in this context too. So like two Filipino American siblings raised in the Midwest. We usually hear stories from people on the West Coast because there's a lot of Filipinos everywhere, but mainly it's like California or New York. You don't really hear a lot of stories about, especially Filipinos from the Midwest. And I think that was something that I guess pushed us forward into just being like, fuck it. Like, let's just do it. Like, let's create something meaningful that also honors our heritage, honors our family, honors our ancestors, and the generations that come after us too. Because you never know what podcast or what's even like something that you say, you never know how that might impact someone else. And also, like we mentioned, calling in other people to join us with, these questions that we have or disconnects that maybe we created in our own minds to our culture. And I think I'm excited. It's called Our Pinoy Origins, which stands for Opo. It's a way to also pay respect to your elders, the Opo Podcast. But I can also let Joseph kind of expand more on why we named it that.
But yeah, that's sort of what Monica said, was just being on this journey, sort of led us to the idea of how do we honor our ancestors while also being able to grow and to move forward with whatever new challenges arise. Because there is always such that weird challenge of being Filipino American, of just the identity sense of being appreciative of the privileges we were granted. As we were going through this journey together about trying to connect with ourselves, we thought it was super interesting, but also difficult to get the idea of what does it mean to be Filipino. So that's why we wanted to create this podcast, because it's trying to be a candid conversation about understanding ourselves, because Filipinos are so inherently defined by being separated and by being sort of set off or different. And that can feel alienating, maybe alienating, like how we were being stuck in the Midwest and maybe not having that super tight community that we sort of hoped for, but it could be empowering by embracing that difference and that struggle. And actually, I'm kind of curious, because I know you sort of mentioned that you were able to have your relationship with being Bengali American, but as also another, Asian American growing up in the Midwest, can I ask, like, how is your relationship with your community on like that macro level? I know you sort of talked about the struggles, but maybe within your own identity, how comfortable do you feel? How confident, I guess, do you feel like you can say confidently you're Bengali American?
That's a really good question. And it kind of makes me laugh because like I won't be able to showcase like the Bengali culture or the traditions per se, but like as someone who loves curry, I'll just go out and say like I love curry, and they're like, "Isn't that the food that smells?" And it's like, "No, you're thinking of something different." So like I love curry because it's really like that's one thing I really love about South Asian. Um, but I'm really comfortable telling people that I'm Bengali American. I just won't like there's like certain things I will showcase. So like eating curry, for example, that's a great example. That's one thing. One of our favorite sports is cricket, which is like the really long version of baseball. So like I have watched a game of cricket and they're like, how long have you been watching this? And it's like, well, this game started at 5:30 and it's like 10:30 in the morning. So like I will showcase that. But I won't be like in terms of like I won't be in like the I guess like the specific aspects of the culture traditions, if that makes sense. The the only things I will showcase are the curry side, the cricket side, and then sometimes people don't know that we exist as a country. So when people are like, "Are you Indian?" and I'm like, "Oh boy, no, I'm from Bangladesh. My parents are from Bangladesh." It's like, "Oh, is that in India?" It's like, "No, that's its own separate country. We're like right next to India." So not in terms of the nitty gritty, but more in just like the curry, cricket, and then just telling people that we are not the same thing as India. Those are like, I guess, where I'll show people that like I'm the Bengali side, which probably doesn't answer the question because cricket and curry is more like popular in South Asia. But I guess to show like a little bit of it or like 1% of it, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like accessibility is such a big issue. And I mean, we're also like a smaller, still developing country in Asia. So I definitely relate to that understanding. And hopefully that's what we're trying to remedy with Opo is just having that platform to connect with the other people that do know the culture. And then that way it can be more prominent. Something that I was always, at least with creating this podcast, was what's how can we go further than representation? How can we grow and not just say this is who we are, but this is who we can be? And I think definitely there's a balance with appealing with the food or the culture or the entertainment stuff like that. But then it's so like the core identity of being who we are is related to that, and it's intrinsic to how its value is shown.
Couple of questions before I let you go. Firstly, I just remembered my question and I can't believe it's been this long. So, but I still think it's still a great question to almost end the podcast. But throughout this whole conversation, we talked a lot about the relationships you guys have with each other and how much you guys admire each other. And I think it's safe to say that you guys have a very positive relationship with one another. Now, Monica, as you know, as a mental health advocate, just because you know something about mental health advocacy or you're interested in mental health doesn't mean you are like always happy. And similar to like sibling relationships, just because you have a positive relationship with your siblings, it doesn't mean that every day it was always like we love each other, there are no conflicts, no trash talking or anything. And so obviously everyone like you said, everyone's different. But how would you guys explain what a positive relationship with your siblings look like? And I know that might be a difficult question, but like for you guys, because I'm still trying to figure this out, because you can still have negative experiences in the positive, but you can't always have positivity. So like how would you describe like what a positive relationship with your siblings look like? And whoever has an answer, you guys can feel free to answer.
I will say, because we've also experienced a negative relationship earlier in our earlier years. Uh, Personally, for me, because I didn't understand emotions, I didn't know how to properly communicate either. Something I would often do if I was feeling angry or confused or something was happening at school or with my parents or something, I would low key, high key take it out on my brother, like because he was there. He was just there to, you know. But I mean, in realizing that and what I explained earlier about just the recognition, I guess, of that behavior and how it impacted him, I think today is completely opposite, where a positive relationship to me is a mutually safe kind of relationship between each other where you can share something that's bothering you, something that's challenging you, and also boundaries. You can respect each other's boundaries too. And like just having open communication. Like I think that's what creates a positive relationship, is being able to hold space for that other person, challenge them, also listen to their challenges. And if anything comes up for you, sharing maybe a boundary or something that you have, and being just open with each other as you do your own individual lives.
Yeah. And especially as we've gotten older and like become adults, that was something that you mentioned was that I've been trying to remedy, is the fact that negative emotions or negative experiences are normal and it's okay, and you need to properly express it and handle it. Otherwise, hoping that it's just going to be positive and it's going to be helpful will only just lead to further um, unhealthy relationships and tendencies, and then it's going to manifest itself in a way that would be hurtful for the relationship. So ultimately, like what Monica said, was just being intentional or trying to put in effort. I think that's the most you can sort of ask out of anyone, is to that they're going to try and that they're going to be vulnerable and willing to be better.
My last question, and I've been thinking about this. I don't know 100% if this is going to be like a signature question. I'm sure, like as you guys do podcasting, as you formulate your questions and conversations, you'll have like, you'll kind of think about like what are some things you'll be asking. But if this is a bad question, we can cut it out. But um, if you were to take out one word out of the dictionary because you feel like this word has a negative impact on people because or it holds people back, it prevents them from really realizing they can do like something special. If you can take out one word out of the dictionary, or even one phrase, probably one word, what would it be and why?
What?
The first thing that came to my mind was self-righteous.
That's
I
interesting.
think that um, for a lot of disagreements or conflict or anything, I think it could be hard to, it can be easy sometimes to boil it down to malice or ignorance or something that is causing like a lot of intentional harm. But self-righteousness in and of itself is just a form of misguided that can be remedied. It, however it manifests, is something that you can correct and that you can try and improve. And I think what we want to achieve is that shared understanding, that mutual understanding. And if you're self-righteous, then you're not opening yourself up.
Monica, what about you?
Oh my gosh. I guess we can also relate this back to what has been mentioned previously. But oh my God, it's so hard to pick one word. If it was one word, maybe I would say better, like in this context of like more is better, or wanting to be better, or like the constant sort of self-improvement sort of thing. Um, just because you don't always have to try to seek more to be better. Um, like you already are. I'm like, this is kind of philosophical, but you already are perfect in like the present moment right now. And I think the inability to see that and constantly strive for more and not necessarily be with yourself, like in this season, in this moment, takes away from the human experience. Constantly striving to meet these expectations or these ideals from whatever communities you're a part of or society at large. I think that sentiment alone is enough to just make you pause and like really be grateful for everything that you have right now. I think we can lose sight of that pretty often.
Yeah, those are two interesting answers. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was thinking about this, and like I said, I don't know if it's like official. I'm leaning towards it, but I'm like, I'm interested in learning your guys' thoughts, but at the same time, like, does it make sense? So I'm glad you're able to. I'm glad you're able to kind of give you guys. I'm glad that you were able to show like, or to be able to come up with interesting answers, for lack of a better term. But if there's one advice I would give for podcasting before we wrap up is like, I think you guys are going to do great. Just continue to just be yourself. And I feel like, because like Monica, I'm like you said that you're a nobody, and you worried about being a nobody. Like I'm a nobody too. Like I don't have anything. I just started a podcast because I was just interested. So I would say for both you and Monica and Joseph, just enjoy the ride. You can definitely be anxious. You can also have like levels of obsessive OCD in the sense where it's like we got to edit A, B, and C because it doesn't look right. But definitely enjoy the journey. Not everyone will like your podcast. Not every guest will. Not every guest you would love to have will be on your podcast. Because I've had people that will go, "Well, you're not Joe Rogan, so why would I join your podcast?" So I'm like, "Oh, that hurts." But just do it for yourself. Enjoy it, and don't focus too much on the future. Just focus on every minute and second. I know you guys have probably heard that, but like it's still important to know because sometimes like when you're in like an area of impact or content creation, I think so many people care more about numbers and analytics as opposed to what's actually being said and like the message. So I know I'm not probably the best person to give you advice because I'm still in that journey, but as someone who's starting out, I would just say definitely enjoy it and just don't be afraid to change things if whenever that may be. So that's my little spiel. But Monica and Joseph, I know I took a lot of your time, but I do want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. These are the conversations I really love to have. Like, I don't want to just have like a Q&A. It's more of like, wait, there's something Joseph or Monica said that I feel like we could go deeper into, and then continuing to ask those really, really weird questions. Really, really weird, meaning like questions you've never been asked, because great answers come from great questions, and who better to do that than with two amazing individuals. So thank you guys so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness. It was great to meet with both of you.
Thank you so much for having us. And I of course we appreciate your advice. You're doing exactly what we're trying to do, and it's valuable.
Yeah, no, it feels really cool to connect with someone like in our same boat that even we're in it together. So, and hopefully, once we are all set up, we'd love to have you on. But as of right now, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, it was great. I don't know why, like once you were done talking, I don't know why I just gave Joseph, maybe he didn't want to say anything, but I was just like, your turn, Joseph. Now it's your turn to thank me. But yeah, nevertheless, thank you so much. And I do hope we get to meet in person someday, whether it be podcasting or just in life in general.
Yes.
Sure.
Keep growing. All the success is coming to you. I feel it.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.